Hello. If you're watching the VOD, my name is Nathan Hatch. If you don't know who I am a health and wellness writer, advocate, scientist, researcher, artist, coffee connoisseur, and I chat about stuff. If you want, I'm gonna let people trickle in here for about 10 minutes, if anybody's around on this quiet, lovely Sunday, and so you can, if you're watching the VOD, you can skip ahead to when we actually start. When the screen changes from starting soon to just like the normal screen. Anyway, I just poured myself some coffee and it's very, very hot. Ooh. Oh, that's good. That's good shit. Did you guys hear me sipping on the coffee, or does the noise gate pick that up? Cut that off. I think the noise gate, according to I don't even know what these are called. The little graphs that show the volume. Oh, that one picked up. I think it's impossible to enjoy coffee without making a sipping sound. Oh. Anyway, how are you guys doing? Put starting. Oops. In the chat. It usually takes a while for people to come in, but probably even more so since I didn't announce this one beforehand and because it's a Sunday. They say that to build a streaming audience, you need to be consistent. And I totally get that too, because when I watch streamers that I watch, I just instinctually know when they're going to be on because they're always on all the time in the same time spaces. But I'm not really interested in being a content creator. So I mean, I guess it might be nice to be a content creator, but I'm just not very good at it. And all my time is taken up by doing research and writing. So this is just more of a supplementary thing to what I do. Oh, hey, Care. How are you doing? Good to see you. No, today I thought I would just do whatever. I haven't streamed in a long time. I'm doing well, thank you. Um Today is a typical Sunday though, when I am not dressed or showered and sleeping in and went for a walk. Yeah, we were chatting on Patreon. Sounds like you're making a lot of progress, and I'm happy to hear that. I thought maybe today. Here, oh wait, I'll switch to coffee screen. I can't remember what I called this. My actual starting screen. I think it's the coffee screen. Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I appreciate your support too. You know, I everybody, all of you on Patreon and other places that help to contribute to my work allows me to do this kind of stuff. And even when people just sign up for coaching or buy books, it lets me do that for work instead of all this for work instead of my normal design career. Yeah, so I didn't have a plan today, but I thought it might be fun to just talk about a broad range of stuff. Because most of my research is finally wrapping up. My book is almost done. Just have a few last things to do with oral disease that research has been very productive on, finally, after like 6 years of experimenting with infectious gingival pathogens. And I'm doing like editing and grammar passes in my book too. And so yeah, so I have a little bit more time now. I'm probably going to be transitioning in the next like few months to more active promotion of my work since my research and writing are nearing the final stages. So that's very exciting. Oh, I breathed in the coffee instead of drinking it. Oh yeah, no, not done. My book has been in active production. The versions that's why I release like an update every like few months or so. Except for before the last update before that, it was 2 years before I released an update because I was working on such really heavy research. But yeah, but it will be. I mean, I don't know if my book will ever really be finished. I'm sure that I will always be doing research and stuff throughout my life, but But it will be air quotes done in a few months. So yeah, so with oral disease, like, and the information that's in my book, uh I haven't yet figured out how to fully eradicate it, but I've figured out how to very strongly control it. So I can still tell that my gums or oral cavity harbors some of the infectious microbes, which is also why I'm not dating, because I don't want to give it to anybody. Um, and well, and for those of you who may not know, I'm talking about all of this as if everybody knows. I purposefully infected myself with oral pathogens so that I could study them. And because I was kind of arrogant coming off of discovering the cure for alcoholism and addiction and depression and hair loss, that I like thought, oh, like it'll only take me like 6 months to a year to like figure this stuff out. And it turns out that it's been way more fucking complicated. But in the interim too, I also ended up solving the Warburg effect and doing, what else have I done? Oh well, and just like a lot of the research in my book that is all oriented toward all pathogens is a product of researching and experimenting with oral disease. And stuff like that helped me figure out that like tannins are antibiotic and anthocyanins are actually kind of tannins, and all that other stuff, all that stuff that's that's mentioned in my book is a product of that. So, but yeah, so anyway, so I've made great progress over the last few years on it. Gotten my gums. You know how like your gums have that little spike of gum tissue in between each tooth, but as you age or you have oral disease, those start to disappear because literally pathogens are eating your tissues. And so like I got mine to grow back, bleeding mostly to stop, but there's still like redness and bleeding every once in a while. So like, but anyway, I basically have, it's helped me figure out more of the, and also, because a lot of people don't know this too, one of the reasons that I have these issues is because I have cystic fibrosis, which impairs your immune system. And so this research has also informed that. So I've figured out things like how vitamin C and copper are, and this is not saying just take those as a supplement. That's not what this is. Like it won't do that. Like don't just take copper and vitamin C and then it doesn't work and then you tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because that's not how it's more about. It's how those things function in your body and how to actually make use of them. That is the way to treat these issues. So I figured out a lot of those kinds of things. Also, manganese plays a role in the immune system that I talk about in my chapter on immunity and stuff like that. So yeah, anyway. Yeah, so I thought we'd talk about whatever you guys want to talk about today. Actually, I thought it might be fun to talk about inventory therapy. I was going to do dedicated inventory stream, but I haven't had a lot of people really contribute content to doing a specifically dedicated inventory stream. And I mean, I say inventory, it's psychological therapy. So most of my streams we have talked about physical health and nutrition, because everybody wants to get a six-pack and look sexy. But in fact, and also too, if you don't know, today I wrote and released a article just on steroids. I've been wanting to, maybe we could start talking about that. And if you guys would like to talk about any psychological issues, dating, financial fears, phobias, frustrations, interpersonal conflict, you can ask me questions about that in the chat and we'll get around to asking those. So maybe I'll start off by discussing steroids like I mentioned with my article today. Like a normal millennial, I watch a lot of social media content, and there's so much of it that is, health and fitness oriented. And a lot of that content is specifically like bodybuilding. And then there's a huge amount of those people who take steroids to do their stuff. And, also too, like, because I was kind of noticing, like, there's, adult content creators, and I mean adult in the sexy way, porn content creators. That's also an industry that I'm sure is, there's a lot of steroids and other things going around in those, and like I've seen performers, like actually what's his name, oh, I can't remember his name. Griffin Barrows. He, I remember he posted a video specifically talking about the harms of using, and I don't know what it's called because I've never even looked into it or anything like that, but that sounds defensive, like nobody asked. But no, like a lot of performers actually use, especially ones that are actually straight and do gay porn, use a chemical that they actually inject directly into their penis that causes a sustained erection without any, like, it just makes you aroused. And the way that works is because actually, like, erections are actually facilitated by relaxation of the muscles that constrict the corpus cavernosum, and so your blood pressure just will normally, if you relax that, then that's what causes an erection. And so actually not having an erection means that constriction is actively occurring. And this is one of the reasons why too, like why guys wake up with morning wood, is because, like, during the night, the processes that induce sleep make you so relaxed and promote regeneration that those muscles relax, and then just your normal blood pressure maintains an erection like that. And anyway, so these performers use this, like, injection to especially if they're straight, to get an erection, which is also why too, when they orgasm, like there's always this, like, very often at the very end of, like, a film, they're really struggling, they, like, are really hitting that hard. And, like, no one else is, doing anything to them. They're just, like, whacking it like it's, like, whacking it with, like, an inch of its life. And it is because they're not really aroused. They are using this, like, this injection that helps to, like, make an erection, but it doesn't necessarily bring you close to orgasm. But anyway, and that, and that's really relevant to sexual health issues too, because, like, a lot of people do use that too when they start to have erectile dysfunction, especially if they are adult performers and content creators. And especially because a lot of sexual health dysfunction is caused by communicable pathogens like trichomonas, and even oral disease. And so when you're young and healthy, your immune system can be quite resistant to catching those. But as you start to age and your body gets stressed out from nutritional stress and dieting and excessive exercise, you end up compromising your immune system. Then you get colonized by trichomonas and oral pathogens that cause metabolic disease and alter your hormones. Like, a lot of people, especially in the gay community, and I say this too, being a gay man, like, I didn't know about trichomonas ever. Like, no one ever talks about it because no one really knows anything about it. It is a parasite that colonizes mucosal tissues, your nasal passages, your lungs, your mouth, your gut, and also the reproductive system. There's one strain called Trichomonas vaginalis that's, it's named misogynistically after the vagina because it's mostly looked for and treated in vaginal infections, but it gets there from the penis and the prostate, and colonization with as well, not only, but as well. Colonization of the prostate by trichomonas inhibits and disrupts your production of testosterone and your blood volume and all these other things, and eventually over time leads to prostate inflammation and prostate cancer. And so anyway, so then like, adult performers, like, the longer you're in the industry and the more stress your body's under from dieting and excessive exercise and other issues too, like that, your immune system starts to fail. Then you contract these pathogens, then they start having chronic effects on your body. And then a lot of people try to make up for that by taking Viagra or using that injection. But you just keep deteriorating because those things aren't healthy for you, and nor do they solve the underlying problem. Yeah, and then you add steroids into that mix too, because a lot of adult performers want to look really sexy. Which, by the way, you don't need to be ripped and shredded to be sexy. Like, there's a lot of I'm specifically, my preference are guys that are, like, thicker and hairy and big, kind of like myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll throw a twink around, like, you know, if the opportunity arises. But hi Ian. Anyway, so people start using steroids, and you know, and you know, in the fitness industry, and even if you're not an influencer, but there's a lot of influencers that talk about using steroids, and they even like there's even a lot of there's sort of a lot of quote unquote responsible steroid users that are influencers who also discuss the also Ian, just to be specific, I will answer that. Hang on real quick. So I don't want you to feel like I'm ignoring you. So I mentioned, if you just got here, I mentioned for people to ask questions, and then I'll get to them as we go, because there's no agenda to today's stream. It's just whatever, because I had some spare time. So anyway, and we're talking about steroids in the moment, and then we're going to talk about psychological health too. So if you guys have psychological health issues and inventory stuff, feel free to ask those questions too. So anyway, there's even like a lot of YouTubers that post like they're like quote unquote responsible steroid users, where they will post content talking about their steroid use, and then they'll also talk about some of the side effects and things like that. But they talk about it in a way as if like this is like an educated risk, like I know what I'm doing, blah blah blah. There's a famous asshole who was just not caught, because I think he even posted the video, but he's this notorious bodybuilding influencer who, you know, who's like really fucking hot, like honestly, right? And he had this roid rage incident where he completely smacked the shit out of his friend. It was like violent. It was like really bad. It was like not okay. And because his friend stole his hat, because one of the side effects of steroid use is hair loss. And so this person, even though they have been, you know, advocating bodybuilding and, you know, saying to, like, you know, use steroids responsibly, like, he's actively experiencing the negative side effects of steroid use through hair loss and also emotional volatility, you know, and anger and stuff like that. And like there's no such thing as responsible steroid use. Like, it's just like there's no such thing as responsible like methamphetamine use. Like it's always going to be harmful. It's really dumb to do that. And the reason a lot of us want to do stuff like that is because we have negative self-images. And just like when people have, you know, when you have a fear of death, for instance, no amount of money or plastic surgery or nutritional program or access to doctors or whatever will relieve you of that fear. And it's the same thing with steroid use. Like, if you are insecure about your body and your power in life and how people respond to you and your physical appearance, no amount of changing your physical appearance is going to change that fear, because it's not the cause of that fear. That kind of fear is rooted in childhood trauma. And many of us, and especially like one of the reasons we like to one of the reasons a lot especially men, but it's not limited to men, but men are, you know, the big part of it, wanting to be bigger, not only to attract mates, but let's be honest too, though, actually, like, bodybuilding is not for women. Like, I mean, not, I'm sorry, that was wrong. That was not what I meant to say. That sounded bad. Bodybuilding is not to attract women. It's not for, like, you're not doing it for women. Like, you're doing it for other dudes. Like, you're doing it to be big, to be like an alpha male, to dominate. Just like this little pussy boy muscle builder who smacked his friend for teasing him. It's born of insecurity. It's born of fear. And no, it doesn't matter how big you are. That it will not solve that fear. So you see these guys who just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's like really disgusting, and it even starts to like disfigure their bodies and causes them massive health problems. Using steroids can give you liver disease, and it can cause cardiovascular problems too, and not to mention all the acne that it causes. And so, like, the ostensible goal in using steroids is to subvert the fear and insecurity that you have that motivates it, but it doesn't do that because they weren't born from that. Oh, sorry, and I got it sidetracked. So, like, it occurs when we are children and we think that the reason that our painful experiences of trauma occurred to us was because we were small and helpless, because you were a child at the time that it happened. But that's actually not true. The reason that we have traumatic experiences as children is not because we're helpless, it's because of the people who committed those abuses to us. I mention this once in a while. I'm 6'7" and I'm 260 pounds. I was like, when I was 19, I was like 225. I have been sexually assaulted 3 different times, and my size did not prevent that from happening, twice by men and once by a woman. And obviously being bigger, I was able to I wasn't able to fend myself off fend my attacker off me the first time because I was so drunk. The second time I was able to push him off of me, and the third time the woman, like, she tried to shove her hands down the front of my pants. It wasn't really that, like, like violent or anything, but it still was a sexual assault. And so obviously I was able to, like, get out of that. But the reason that trauma happens to us is not because we are weak or lack the ability to defend ourselves. It is because of the perpetrators that commit those actions. We are not responsible for the trauma that happens to us. I cannot tell you how many women I have coached over the years who were raped by their own fathers when they were children. And it's insane. I had no idea that happened to the extent that it does. I thought it was so rare. I couldn't believe that I have encountered it so often in the course of my counseling. And then these women too, a lot of them that this happens to, grow up being exceptionally nervous and emotional and excitable and kind of desperate's not quite the right word, but it's close, looking for relief from this trauma because it is so violating to have somebody that should be your ultimate protector being your the person that commits these crimes against you. And these are the same kinds of things that happen to us when we want to do things like take steroids to get bigger, or lose weight so that we're sexy, or or have a lot of money, to protect ourselves from, like, financial stress. None of those solutions actually solve the fear and trauma that underlie them, and that motivation and desire for it, because they aren't the cause of it. The cause of it is life and people and the things that can happen in life that we have no control over anyway. Yes, I do care. So I'll talk about that too. So yeah, so you see these people doing steroids and trying to be really fit and huge. And one of the ironies too is that steroid use, a lot of it is really just to make up for the harmful catabolic effects of the dieting and exercise strategies that these people are using in the first place. A lot of I'm sure everybody here has read my book. There's a chapter in the book called Free Muscle where I talk about how musculature is so easy to maintain if you just keep your blood sugar up all the time. Because if you just add a minuscule amount of muscle every single day, it will accumulate really quickly, as long as it doesn't get catabolized, reconsumed or recycled by the body, you just keep it and it just stays there. And that happens indefinitely. And early in my recovery, I noticed this effect because I started using, like, a lot of strategies to treat my cancer, because cancer is driven by catabolic stress hormones in large part, as well as pathogenic organisms. A lot of muscle care, like a lot. Like, I'm huge. I mean, I didn't turn my cam on today because I'm a mess. I cut my hair though. I couldn't do the long hair thing. It was starting to bug the shit out of me. So my hair's short again. But, like, I'm huge. I mean, I've got a little bit of a gut, but I don't work out. I would work out and do more athletics if I wasn't actively researching, oral gingival disease, and I had more energy to do. But I'm not active, but I'm enormous. Like, I have so much bulk on me and muscle and it's all muscle that I put on like 8 years ago. Hello, Tara. And it does, yeah, you can be off topic. I'll go through all the questions after. You're totally cool. I appreciate that. It gives me more content to hang around and talk about. So anyway, but like the muscle that I have is like muscle that I built like 8-9 years ago, and I just have kept it on because I'm always keeping my blood sugar high, keeping stress hormones low, and balancing my electrolytes. Like I talk about like in the chapter on free muscle, how like sodium and chloride help to like maintain uh, cellular repletion with nutrients and and stuff. And anyway, so like when you're diet, so people that are like active athletes that are like constantly dieting and constantly working out too much, the release of the stress hormones that occur from that behavior is catabolic. It literally consumes your muscle into usable sugar because the glycogen that's in your liver is actively released to feed your bloodstream, but glycogen in your muscles is not. And so when your liver runs out of glycogen, the body releases cortisol to tear down lean muscle to free the glycogen that's in there, and also releases amino acids from consumed cells. And so so that behavior is constantly tearing down muscle. So then you have a hard time putting on muscle. So then you're desperate, and you want to use steroids that then come with all of these harmful side effects. And also, I mentioned this too. I started talking about adult performers because there was this one performer that I noticed obviously started using steroids. And one of the really funny effects of steroids is that it will actually cause your navel to grow in size. So guys that use steroids will usually have a really protruding belly button, and sometimes it looks so gross. It looks like a tumor popping out of their stomach. And it can even make your head grow in size too. Like steroids, because steroids are hormones of growth. Like they cause anabolism, they cause growth. And if you're just injecting yourself with them, it'll cause spontaneous growth problems at random. And this is even worse for men because one of the major problem pathways in steroids is that testosterone actively aromatizes into estrogen. And then also this triggers a lot of people's misogyny. Estrogen is not a problem because it is a female hormone. Estrogen excess is a problem because estrogen is a hormone of growth. And both men and women have and use estrogen. And one of the mechanisms by which testosterone grows muscle is through the aromatization of testosterone into estrogen, because estrogen is a hormone of growth and estrogen is made from androgens. But if you're male, you have less progesterone, and progesterone protects the human body from the inappropriate growth effects of estrogen. That's why femaleness is not determined by estrogen. It is determined by the ratios of progesterone, estrogen, and androgens all together. And then the same kind of principle in men too, just having different profiles. So that's why transgender people can change their gender appearance, is because just changing your hormone profile actively does that. Men actively have. I had somebody recently actually ask me, and they were from kind of a religious background, so I wasn't too surprised they didn't know this. But they mentioned to me, they said that their friend who was male had breast cancer, and I was like, yeah. And what I didn't understand is they were confused, and they were actually asking me a question. So I said, oh, yeah, no, men have, like all men, we all have every single part of the breast and mammary gland that females have, that women have. The only difference between men and women biologically, which is also used as a excuse to construct artificial societal expectations of gender norms, which are not a thing, is the vagina and penis. And those also don't create gender. Gender is a process that actually occurs in the womb, in how the brain is shaped. And the penis and vagina and all these other, and secondary male characteristics like hairier forearms, those are all things that result from just your balance of hormones. So it's also the reason too why, like, as men age, we start to present with more sort of classically feminine features, like being softer, packing on more fat, getting man boobs, things like that, and having less virility, is because more testosterone becomes aromatized into estrogen through the aging process because of a lowered metabolic rate and stuff like that. And estrogen is actually protective for the body. It is meant, like, every single time that you get a cut or you get injured, estrogen is involved in regrowth processes that regenerate tissue, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have estrogen. But then when you pump your body full of extra testosterone, the body can't manage that, so it aromatizes into estrogen, which then starts causing inappropriate growth effects because you lack the naturally high levels of progesterone that women normally have. And also this same problem happens in women when women's progesterone levels plummet through illness or infection, and you start getting like PCOS and endometriosis and stuff like that. That's kind of like the same problem. Like, you start, like, your levels of progesterone decline, so your body is not able to protect all of the cells from the inappropriate influence of this growth hormone. So anyway, so using steroids is really bad, and and because it's motivated by trauma, which is mostly what I wanted to talk about today, is you don't fix those issues by getting big and doing steroids. It's good to take care of your body, but the over dieting and excessive exercise and pushing yourself when you obviously can't handle it and your body's stressed, those are behaviors that are motivated by trauma and our coping and control mechanisms that desire to have control over life, which we do not have. So you just end up like a hamster on a running wheel, and just constantly being frustrated year after year after year after decade with nothing ever changing, because the way that you're trying to change it, you're trying to change things that aren't the problem in the first place. Like, it's not a problem that you're skinny or fat or old or sick. It's fine. There's lots of things in life that we can't control, and when you have a problem with that, it adds to the stress that ironically makes it harder for you to get better, because that induces stress hormones. When you're stressed out about being sick, it gets worse because stress causes sickness. So you're just exacerbating the problem. So yeah, anyway. And also, for any of you that don't know, I have a video on here that teaches you inventory therapy, that walks you through trauma. It's very brief, like, trauma is a very complicated subject to discuss and address, but that video makes an attempt to do that, and can teach you the practice to start teaching yourself skills to resolve those and feel empowered in your life. And like, because one of the everybody that does steroids and works out too much and shames fat people and is so terrified about their diet and getting fat, like, your entire life is just oriented toward pleasing others. Like, you're just constantly worried about what other people think about you. And then because other people also have the same problem, and they're also judgmental and shitty, they're not going to think good about you anyway. Like, a lot of that I get a lot of harassment and criticism from people. Not everyone that criticizes me is a homophobe, but a lot of them are homophobes. And then they just criticize me because they just don't like me. And if I were to try to appease them, it wouldn't mean shit, because they don't fucking care about me in the first place. So, like, when your entire life is oriented toward trying to make people like you, that is an adaptive coping mechanism that results from experiences of trauma and rejection when you were a child. But the problem is it doesn't fix those issues. The only option is to actually resolve that trauma by learning the kinds of skills like I talk about in inventory therapy, and empowering yourself to live in spite of those problems, not in service of them. So yeah. So let's see, Ian. Oh yeah, Ian, you said you had a solid stool for several weeks. Any thoughts? Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, Ian, that's an okay question. Yeah. That's problem very specifically is very hard to be specific about, because generally when you have diarrhea or loose stool and watery stool and stuff like that, it's because your body is trying to evict opportunistic gut pathogens that are causing you problems. In fact, very often when you get your first dose of vitamin D for the year and your body suddenly gets replete with vitamin D, very often you will have like really strong evacuative bowel movements that like flush everything out and get very watery. And it's one of the ways in which the body like just dumps those opportunistic microbes that cause a lot of metabolic disease. So it can be for a good reason, but several weeks is kind of long. So yes, it probably is a chronic problem. But if you're taking lots of supplements, especially a lot of electrolytes, one of the problems, like I talk about in my book, Ian, is how ammonia inhibits absorption of sodium and chloride in the gut. And then that can cause those electrolytes to remain in the gut, where they then disturb the commensal microbiome and cause lots of digestive problems anyway. And this is actually one of the underlying causes of diabetes, is that colonization by ammonia-producing microbes prevents diabetics from absorbing salt. So then they often crave salt chronically, which is then observed by stupid people that they're eating too much salt. But in fact, the problem is that they have salt malabsorption, which is why they're craving the salt and then eating more. But then because you're not absorbing it, that amount of salt is then killing off the microbiome. So you could have a situation that's occurring like that. And all I can really tell you on stream is to just like make sure that you have lots of tannins and anthocyanins in your diet. Have grape juice, purple grape juice every single day, and tea. You can also, consume extra pectin supplementally, like I talk about in my book, to help acidify the gut. Try those things. Because I mentioned the supplementing of electrolytes, because like you could be causing this through a supplement that you're taking. And I run into this all the time. Like if you're taking a supplement that is not in my book, you should probably stop it, because I have tried everything under the sun, and the only things that I have found useful are in my book. Not even on my website. Like I have a supplement, page on my website, and the only reason I keep that up is because it brings traffic to my site. People interpret that as if it's like endorsement of those, even though I say it's not. It's just an explanation of them. I don't use very many supplements at all. And you can very much cause yourself like problems by taking many of the supplements that are on the market. So just like stop all of them unless I recommend it, just to try see if that affects that too. So Kara, do I have any tips on the cause section in the fear inventory? Yeah. When I coach people on psychological health and inventory therapy, and we do the fear cause, and the cause is of either the fear or the resentment inventory. I very often notice there's two problems. Number one, people don't spend enough time there, because we don't want to do inventory therapy, right? And this is really funny too, because whenever I teach people inventory therapy, they always treat me like I don't know that they don't want to do it. Like, I fucking know you don't want to do it. I don't want to do it either. Like, I would love it if life was different and we could just chillax and not, have to do these kinds of things to take care of ourselves. It would be so much easier. Part of the problem with inventory therapy, yes, is that we don't want to do it. We just have a natural inclination we want to spend our time doing other things. Or we have resistance because it also challenges our existing coping and control mechanisms. And so as a byproduct of that, what we end up doing is we end up going through it too quickly. So you'll start going through the columns, and you kind of just get one or two things and then rush through it. But the problem is that one of our primary adaptive coping mechanisms to trauma is to actively ignore problems that we do not feel empowered to control or confront. So if you continue to do that through the inventory therapy, you don't understand them fully. And the entire point of the inventory therapy is to help you understand what happened to you, why it affected you, and how you can heal from that. So you have to spend time in those columns contemplating those issues. So spend enough time in the cause column. don't just rush out of it as soon as you get a few things and feel like you did it just enough to get, a passing grade. Like, especially like, because like there's no one sitting over your shoulder that's grading you on these things and telling you did it wrong. This is for you and you are choosing to do it. But many of us still operate as if our mom or dad or our teacher is staring at over our shoulder, trying to, make us do it right. And then that also keeps people from doing, I tried to teach this poor girl who was a terrible alcoholic, the inventory therapy. And like, it was just like pulling teeth because she had had so many, traumatic experiences with authority figures, with her parents and, whatever. And just did not want to do any self-reflection, and even just like remotely pointing out that maybe there was like a better way that she could have done an entry was received as a criticism, like a insulting criticism rather than a helpful, useful criticism. And then the problem is, though, then we do that to ourselves in private when we are trying to do these practices. We become our own berater and our own authoritarian to us while we're doing it. You didn't do it right, or you did it wrong, or blah, 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 or, like I'm really bad for being like this, or, not wanting to put down character weaknesses because we are so afraid of admitting that we are dishonest or narcissistic or cowardly. And in reality, your brain is just parroting all of the negative authoritarian experiences that you had during your life. And you don't have to do that. And in fact, you can inventory that too. Like, you can inventory the fact that you do that to yourself, which will then help to enlighten your unconscious mind to the reality of the situation, and that behavior will change also. I was coaching somebody about this not too long ago who wasn't aware that they were that they felt that like one of the biggest problems, especially if like you struggle with alcoholism and depression and anxiety, one of the underlying constants in everyone's life is the mistaken idea that you're wrong or bad for wanting certain things. Even things that you may intellectually think are good, like love or sex, or maybe you were raised in a home that taught you sex was bad, so you intellectually know that wanting sex is fine, but you still feel wrong for having wanted it. Is a big problem here. So we don't spend a lot of time in like the cause or other columns in the inventory practice, because you have this underlying sense that you fucked up in some way, that you're bad or wrong for wanting something. And that's not true. I tell people whenever I coach them, sometimes many, many, many times before it sinks in, that there is never anything wrong with anything that you want or need, period. It's how we go about getting those needs and wants met that usually causes problems. And we can even take this to the most extreme, ridiculous, although it's not ridiculous when we're talking about, life in general and humanity scenario, in like people that do really horrible things like murderers and rapists. Let's take rapists for instance, okay? Like people, they're especially men who want sex, who resort to sexual violence to get those needs met, are men who were taught in their childhood that it's not okay for them to have or want sex, and also not empowered with the skills to solicit it properly from romantic partners. There's nothing stopping any man from being suave and kind and funny and romancing somebody and getting a partner to have sex with. But their brain is so traumatized by their experience as a child that they believe that they not only either can't get sex or they shouldn't get sex. and they act on that. But the thing is, there's nothing wrong with wanting intimacy and sex. It's how we go about getting it that is the problem. But most people, especially when we do things that are unhelpful or dangerous for our own well-being, when you do things like that, you put yourself in jeopardy, not only legally but morally. And you destroy potential relationships, and and also too, people like that too feel a desire for control. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to feel in control. The problem is actively acting on that impulse. Of course, we all want to be in control, right? Life is scary. People are stupid and mean. Rejection is embarrassing sometimes. Relationships are hard. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in control, but how you go about having control in your life is what causes those problems, because there are appropriate ways to do it and inappropriate ways to do it. And if you're not empowered with those skills, you end up fucking up and you end up destroying relationships and opportunity and putting yourself in danger. And there's a lot of things that you can do in life that you can never recover from. You can do things in life that jeopardize your safety and well-being by doing criminal things that you can't ever fix. And so it's very, very important to recognize that our ego and self-defense mechanisms and control mechanisms that motivate this kind of behavior are not actually in your best interest. Like I talk about this in the book, that human evolutionary psychology is not designed for the well-being of the individual. And very often when I say that, people might immediately think like, oh, victims of crime and bad human behavior are the victims of that. And that's kind of true, but the real victims, okay, I'm not going to finish that sentence because that could be really bad. The perpetrators are as much, if not more, of a victim of human psychology in that scenario, because they will never know what it is like to have a peaceful, normal, fulfilling life. When you have significantly unresolved trauma and you behave in a way such that jeopardizes your ability to exist, to coexist with other human beings and yourself even, that's very detrimental. You won't, you just won't ever get to have that. Hi, Mike. So it is very, very important that you don't listen to the ego when you do inventory therapy and you spend enough time in each of the columns trying to understand exactly what it is as much as you can. So, and that was a very long answer because there's even another part to it. The second part that causes problems when you're trying to figure out the causes, a lot of people really just don't visit their childhood when they're doing that. Every time that I'm coaching with people, I always have to coax them to try to get them to understand exactly the experiences that they had as children that caused those problems in the first place. Like, for instance, if let's take lying, for instance, like if you put down, or not lying, that's a character weakness specifically. So like if you have a fear, like let's say you have a fear of getting in trouble. This is a big one. A lot of us still are running around like little 10-year-olds thinking that our mom and dad are going to get mad at us. And that motivates so much of our behavior. And we even just avoid friends, and we tiptoe around at work because we're just constantly afraid of getting in trouble. So where did that originate? Like in the cause, you go and you write down, like you explore, like, where did this start? Where did this begin? And it began in childhood. It began when your parents were overly punitive. They would get mad at you for like the littlest things and just constantly picking at you, and even things that weren't wrong, they would still characterize them as wrong as an excuse to assert themselves over you. So, but you don't even visit your childhood because your childhood was the source of the trauma. Most people, and remember, most of our coping mechanisms are based in avoidance and ignoring things that we don't want to revisit. So most people will often not investigate their childhood when exploring the cause column because it is a source of trauma. But you need to uh, think about, like, what formative experiences did you have and where did they come from? And very often in those kinds of things, it's just from parents who were traumatizing. They were, your parents were also themselves traumatized. They did not possess effective parenting skills, so they reacted to these things in such a way that then caused you to be abused. So yeah. So visit your childhood too when you're doing those. How would we inventory a fear of being unattractive, especially if the cause is lack of interest in real time and being jealous of attractive friends getting interest from people? Yeah, Kara, that's a great question. Okay. So, I'm very attractive. I mean, I am. But I didn't used to think that for a very long time, and a lot of people think that that's very arrogant to even admit. But when I was younger, especially in my 20s and 30s, I did not think I was good looking at all, but I was really good looking. And my insecurity and shyness prevented me from really benefiting from that at all anyway. And I usually avoided men that I was really attracted to and would settle for men that I thought were less attractive, because that's a control mechanism. Like I felt safer, quote unquote, in their presence because I thought for sure, that was who I was worthy of and therefore safer with, right? But in reality, and I could have done much better, and I don't mean in terms of physical appearance. I mean in usually the men that came after me were charismatic narcissists who I was basically a trophy wife to them. And so they didn't treat me well at all. And I would have been much better off with the more attractive ones that I was really actually attracted to, because those specific ones were also usually like actually kinder people. Like there was this boy that I met, oh my God, like I think I was probably like 27 or 28. Oh no, this is much later than that. Probably 29. I met him at a bar one night and we went home together, and oh, he was so beautiful. He was like 2 years younger than me, and he was like he was studying to be a yoga teacher. I mean, he was probably the most beautiful boy I've ever had in my bed. And we had such chemistry, and that really scared me. Like I got really scared because I was so, insecure and traumatized that and we kind of went out like 2 or 3 times, but I let it fizzle out so fast because he just made me so nervous. And so fear of being unattractive is usually completely delusional. Like a lot of us, and especially if we have standards of beauty that we have inherited, even if we don't want to admit to it, that like you have to have a 6-pack, or you have to be young, or you have to be like, certain, any kind of certain way big, like, all the guys we talked about with doing steroids. Those are usually, those standards are usually products of trauma and are not grounded in reality. I tell this in my book. I was really kind of surprised after my life fell apart and I went back in the social scene because I was overweight still. And I was really surprised at the amount of guys that just like threw themselves at me. There was probably more than when I was actually like younger and fit. And a lot of that had to do with probably being less intimidating, like if I had a gut, I probably wasn't an asshole. So, but like I just had these experiences with guys that I was just like shocked because I was I kind of was just so used to people being shallow that I was never exposed to the ones that weren't. And care, part of this desire to be attractive is itself a control mechanism. So for instance, like rejection is painful, so a lot of people go to extremes to try to avoid rejection. There's this entire culture on the internet of men that are just so terrified of rejection that they do horrible things to people and say some of the most horrible stuff, trying to manipulate others and control them and reduce the chances of rejection. But guys, people, guess what? Rejection isn't a fucking big deal. We're so afraid of rejection. Like, dating is nothing but rejection. Like, you just, like, that's all that it is. Like, dating, you go through rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection until you find the one person that doesn't. Or the several. I mean, you don't have to have just one, but like, it's nothing but a series of rejections. But because we have these, because when we have unresolved control mechanisms and trauma, the experience of rejection is very stressful because you believe that you need to avoid it. But that's not true. It's fine. Like, it's just not a fucking big deal. Like, if someone rejects you, you just avoided somebody that you're not going to get along with, and you can spend all your time with somebody that does. My ex told all of my friends that he was no longer in love with me 2 years before we broke up. He asked me to marry him after that time. It was fucking insane. The reason he didn't break up with me when he wanted out originally was because he did not want to be viewed as the bad guy. But he ended up becoming the bad guy for sure, because he fucking wasted both of our time pretending like he was actually in love with me because he wanted to not be the bad guy. And every time I broke up with him, he would come back to me crying and begging to be taken back. And it wasn't because he liked me. It was because he didn't want to be viewed as the bad guy. He wanted me to break up with him and then and stick with that. And he tried to get out of our relationship in a manipulative way rather than just taking responsibility for it and just saying, hey, this isn't working out. I'm really sorry. And we should just go our separate ways. Rejection doesn't have to be a big deal. It is a big deal to people who've been taught, like me, that, that you should take yourself very seriously, that love and relationships and sex are very serious. They're not. Like, it's fun. Like, you can have fun. Life can be fun. People can be fun. Relationships can be fun. I hate, one of the phrases I hate the most is that relationships take work. They don't. Relationships, do you know who relationships take work for? Fucking narcissists. People that are selfish and self-centered. Relationships are hard for them. But if you take yourself less seriously and you don't get upset every time, your partner, doesn't do what you want or people reject you, it's not work. You just move on to the next thing. You just go do your own thing and have other fun, So, like, when we have a fear of being unattractive, what it really is a fear of rejection. But you should, specifically in the inventory, you should inventory both. Do both a fear of rejection and a fear of being unattractive. Because what you're really afraid of is you're really just afraid that you don't have control over people. That's it. You're afraid of not having control over others because you know that if you were attractive, you would have control over people. But guess what that gets you? When you are attractive and it gets you control over people, whether you intend to or not, though the people that respond to that are equally as traumatized and shallow. So you end up attracting you end up ironically attracting more pain and heartache. It's great. Attractive people are great. I like, hot boys are awesome. Like God knows I take advantage of that a lot, but you don't need to be. And like, and I'm much older now, I'm 44. I do not command attention from, really hot young people, and that's fine. I don't even want that anyway. The annoying part is that a lot of my guys my age are still traumatized and don't want someone like me. They want someone that fulfills their insecurities, and fears. They want to date somebody who's young and fit because they're afraid of being old and unattractive. So that lowers the pool of dating potential quite a bit. Not that I am dating right now anyway, but it's just a control mechanism. So when you actually do inventory those things, you start to recognize, like, you're jealous when you say that you're jealous of attractive friends getting interest. You're jealous of the control that they have because of their attractiveness, because control makes us feel safer in our lives. Remember, like I talk about in my book, the needs that we have as a human being to feel fulfilled. A lot of them, inclusion in groups and emotional security, and because we, as a species, we are not designed to survive on our own individually. We are literally biologically designed to exist within a group of other human beings, and our biology is very severely designed to dissuade loss of that group support. So fears of rejection are rooted in our biological survival mechanism, so they are unhelpful for your psychological well-being if you don't understand them. And if you're traumatized, they get exaggerated to a point that can be very destructive. Like, I make this analogy. Actually, I need to pour myself some coffee, so I'm going to do that, and I'll be back in 10 seconds. Hang on. So I give. Oh, Kara, sorry, I just saw your last question too. And Mike, everybody else, I'll get to your questions. I promise. You know me. I tend to be extra winded. Yeah, I do. Sorry, Kara, I do coaching. Yes, for inventory specifically. Even it's not. You don't have to only sign up. I guess the way that my coaching things are presented, it would appear that way. But yeah, you can sign up for coaching if you want to. Just for inventory and psychological stuff you like too. It doesn't have to be nutritional. I end up usually, when I coach people, we always usually end up transitioning into inventory therapy and psychological counseling, actually, because because that is actually the more impactful factor in our health and well-being. Actually, all the decisions and things that we make, you guys, as in terms of health and wellness, is all a lot of it is motivated by trauma. You know. One of the reasons I have been able to do this kind of research and make this kind of progress in science that I have is because I was able to learn and develop inventory therapy, removed a lot of my compulsive control mechanisms, and that created a lot of space for me to be able to actually do the things that I needed to do to get that work done and even understand science, actually. You know, like, for instance, a very basic example, one of my sisters refuses to read my book, and I was so shocked at the reason, because it wasn't even anything that I had ever even thought of. She gets really angry when I use a word she doesn't understand. Like, this is so fucking stupid. It's like the dumbest thing. Like, she's insecure, because my dad was really insecure about intelligence and stuff. He always told us not to say growing up, so I make sure to say as much as I can. You know, and I'm you know, far more intelligent than my father ever was, or could be even. And I say all the time, you know, like, I don't fucking care. Is not a marker of intelligence. Curiosity is. And so, like, you know, and he traumatized my sister, and, you know, and I'm critical about my dad, but he was traumatized into being that way as well. We are not responsible for our trauma, but we are responsible for our behavior. So, you know, so that's why the inventory therapy also asks you to take responsibility for your behavior in certain parts. But anyway, so yeah, so, like, you know, my sister doesn't know a lot of this stuff and has health problems, and her family has health problems and psychological problems because she refuses to even read her own brother's work, just because she's so insecure about not understanding words that she could just fucking look up on her phone. So psycho. Anyway, what was I talking about? Fear of being, control mechanisms. Oh yeah, because I was talking about how, like, you guys, like, a lot, all of us, like, a lot of the reasons that we are doing these things is because of our fears of rejection and lacking control and being diseased. Like when you get older, like, very often when I coach people who are older or getting older, one of the fears that underlies their desire to be healthy is a fear of being dependent on others. You know, because when you get older and you start getting ill, you start to get to a point where you can't take care of yourself, and then you're reliant and dependent on other human beings who may or may not be around or available or reliable. They might even be exploitative, because part of, like, you know, you guys, when you do fear inventories, one of the causes under the fear is very often that we know that people can and do exploit our weaknesses and vulnerabilities for their own benefit. That's why we're afraid of a lot of these things. But then the problem is that we then design our behavior to account for theirs, And that's actually manipulation. Like, you can't do that. When you do that, you're doing the same thing they're doing. And that's why it's so hard very often to just like resolve or get over psychological trauma just from just trying your best or even going to therapy, because the way that the inventory is structured is it separates all those parts, so then it becomes much more easy to understand. We're not responsible for other people's behavior, and you don't need to be. And so but when you when you start getting older and you start fearing dependence on others, that's also a motivation in there. But we all will get to that point eventually. We can't help it. We have certain limitations on mortality that are immutable. You can't change them. There will always everyone will die. And that's not even a pessimistic nihilistic thing to say. Death is special. It's neat that it happens. We wouldn't even be here as a species if death didn't exist as a concept. In fact, the planet wouldn't even be here if the death of stars and galaxies didn't occur. These cycles are requisite for the existence of reality itself. So being afraid of it is unproductive and unhelpful. There's no reason to be. Very often the reason to be afraid of dependency and disease and death is because we were taught to and traumatized by our childhoods to be that way and think that way, instead of having reverence, and awe for it. So yeah. So of course it's fine to want to be healthy. It's even fine to want to be hot. There's nothing wrong with that. I wish I was shredded right now.